This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. Pentagon officials are openly acknowledging that the military campaign in Syria and Iraq could take years to succeed. This comes as the latest round of airstrikes in Syria hit targets near the Turkish border, close to an area where tens of thousands of Kurds have fled to escape from militants tied to the Islamic State group. On Tuesday, President Obama made his first public remarks about the strikes inside Syria.
And because of the almost unprecedented effort of this coalition, I think we now have an opportunity to send a very clear message that the world is united, that all of us are committed to making sure that we degrade and ultimately destroy not only ISIL, but also the kinds of extremist ideologies that would lead to so much bloodshed. This is not going to be something that is quick, and it's not something that's going to be easy. It will take time, and it's not only a military effort.
President Obama also met on Tuesday with leaders from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Bahrain, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates in New York. Despite claims that the strikes targeted only militant sites, some residents of Idlib province in Syria said civilian areas had been hit.
The military headquarters are far from the city, in the mountains. There are no military headquarters inside the city. All the people who were killed today were displaced civilians from Aleppo, fearing the bombs of Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian president.
We go now to London, where we're joined by Patrick Coburn, Middle East correspondent for The Independent.
I want to just say a few
His new
words
book
about
is
our
called
decision.
The Jihadis Return, ISIS and the New Sunni Uprising. Patrick, welcome back to Democracy Now! So President Obama says we must degrade and destroy the Islamic State. Is this the new line in the sand? Do you see echoes of 2003? Is this going to deal with this violence in the Middle East, with this group and the related group, Khorasan?
No, it's not. I mean, it's, as he said himself, it's going to take years, but I don't think it's going to work. You know, the first day of bombings like this, or bombardments, are usually the best. And there are pictures on television of large buildings being blown up, and it all looks very effective. But usually the buildings have nobody in them. Remember that this didn't work when the US had 150,000 soldiers in Iraq in 2006 and 2007. So I doubt if it's going to work now. It's going to make it more difficult for the Islamic State to put its gunmen into convoys and launch blitzkrieg attacks on bases and on towns. But otherwise, it's not going to have a decisive effect. And you can see that in Iraq, where they've been bombing since the beginning of August, and ISIS, the Islamic State, is still on the offensive.
Will it have a recruiting effect?
Yes, I think they're probably not short of recruits anyway. They've, you know, in Iraq and Syria, you have a vast body of unemployed, bitter young men who will look to the Islamic State as somebody who will employ them, somebody who shows religious leadership. So I don't think that they'll have any problem with recruitment.
And Patrick Coburn, one of the things that's quite striking about what's occurred in Syria since the strikes began is that they're targeting a group, Khorasan, which Obama never mentioned. The focus of the administration has consistently been the Islamic State or ISIS or ISIL. But the first that we heard of Khorasan was yesterday. Could you explain who this group is and why it is that they are said to constitute a threat to the United States, an argument that has not been made with as much specificity about ISIS?
Well, I think that it is a bit mysterious, this group. One's a little suspicious that the administration, those who are carrying out the bombing, may want to say to its audience in America that here are people we're attacking who are about to attack you in the homeland, which ISIS didn't show much sign of doing. So that might be one reason why this obscure group is suddenly given such publicity.
Well, didn't President Obama need this threat to the so-called homeland, that the criticism when he was attacking ISIS was precisely what you just said, while it might be threatening people there and the region overall, that wasn't the justification. And again, following up on that question, who is Khorasan? Who is this group that they're calling the Al-Qaeda All-Stars?
Well, they remain obscure. And also Al-Qaeda is kind of a back number. You know, for years the administration has gone on about Al-Qaeda core, Al-Qaeda central in the mountains of Pakistan, as if this was an influential group, and they'd announced great victories over them. Killing bin Laden was one, but also killing officers of this tiny group, also in Yemen. But all the time, a much larger group, larger by factors of several hundred, was growing up in Iraq and Syria, which is the Islamic state of Iraq and the Levant. So I think they still rather yearn to connect the jihadi movement to the old Al-Qaeda, which was pretty small, just had a few camps, and avoid the much more serious question of confronting the Islamic State, which controls an area larger than Britain with 5 or 6 million people in it. So I think it's a diversionary and an attempt really to show that ISIS is a direct threat to the homeland.
Well, there have even been some reports suggesting that Khorasan is fighting ISIS. I don't know whether that's accurate, but it says that there are some reports that say that the leader of Khorasan had been tasked with fighting ISIS in Syria.
Well, he'd have his work cut out. You know, you have Jabhat al-Nusra, which is the official affiliate of Al-Qaeda Central, so-called, which was originally set up by ISIS and then broke away from it. But that's been on the retreat. It lost the whole of eastern Syria to ISIS over the summer. It has some strength in Idlib province and then again in the south near the border with Jordan. But otherwise is very much on the back foot. So I mean, ISIS holds about 1/3 of Syria and about 1/4 of Iraq. So to try to equate some tiny group that suddenly emerges with ISIS, I think is to blur what's really going on.
I want to turn to comments made by Secretary of State John Kerry. He met with his Iraqi counterpart Ibrahim al-Jafar and Iraqi President Fuad Massoum on Tuesday. Kerry addressed a joint news conference after the meeting.
I want to just say a few words about our decision to conduct strikes against ISIL targets in Syria and also against seasoned Al-Qaeda operatives in Syria who are known as the Khorasan group. We have been very clear from the beginning. We will not allow geography or borders to prevent us from being able to take action against ISIL. And we will not allow them to have a safe haven where they think they can have sanctuary against accountability. We will hold them responsible for their grotesque atrocities. And we will not allow these terrorists to find a safe haven anywhere. That is President Obama's resolve. If left unchecked, ISIL is not only a threat to the stability of Iraq and to the region, but it is a threat to countries elsewhere, including here.
That was Secretary of State John Kerry. Patrick Coburn, could you respond to what he said? And also the argument that you've made repeatedly in your pieces is that ISIS, both in Syria and Iraq, given the opposition to the regimes in both those places, may be viewed as the lesser of two evils.
By the Sunni community, certainly it is often regarded as the lesser of two evils. I mean, you know, I have friends in Mosul, which ISIS has controlled for the last 3 months, and they don't like ISIS, but they're truly terrified of the Iraqi army and the Shia militias coming back. The same is true in Syria, in towns north of Aleppo that ISIS control, and in Raqqa, that assuming they're Sunni, of course it's different if you're Christian or another religion. If you're Sunni, then ISIS is difficult to live with, but you stand a better chance of staying alive. And I think that the whole sort of strategy, which has been to try to separate part at least of the Sunni community from ISIS by getting the tribes on to revolt and so forth, I think just isn't going to work. It worked in 2007 in Iraq to a degree, but I don't think it'll work now. ISIS is too big, too violent, and is expecting a stab in the back.
We have to break, but when we come back, Patrick Coburn, a couple quick questions. Is the U.S. now working with Syria, the country President Obama wanted to bomb or destabilize the government of Syria? Is he now working with that country? And also, what about the allies that the U.S. says they are working with, the Arab countries? What are they doing in these airstrikes? Patrick Coburn's Middle East correspondent for The Independent. His new book, The Jihadis Return, ISIS and the New Sunni Uprising. Stay with us.